At the family dinner, when my wife shouted that the house was hers now, I felt something inside me go out like a light that finally burns after insisting on it for a long time. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't bang on the table. I didn't argue. I sat there, taking a deep breath, feeling the weight of each eye on the table facing me. The atmosphere had started awkward since we arrived at the restaurant. It was my mother's birthday, one of those nights when everything was supposed to be celebration, laughter, and old stories. My 6-year-old daughter was by my side, swinging her little legs, trying to maintain her joy despite the tensions she feels but still can't understand. My wife has already come with a sour smile on her face from the door, the kind that stands her ground just to show everyone that she's happy, even when she's brimming with anger. I tried to keep everything light. I commented on the day at work, asked about my mother's memories, but I could see my father looking at my wife with that serious expression, as if he knew she was about to drop a bomb. My father never got into my problems with anyone, but he always had a keen nose for identifying who is acting out of self-interest, and my wife lately was letting any interest overflow without any care. When the waiter brought the dishes, she raised her glass of wine as if to make a toast, even thought that the climate would improve. But no, she used the toast to attack as if delivering a blow. He looked at me and said, "Loud enough for the whole restaurant to hear. The house is mine now. You're going to have to get the hell out." My mother widened her eyes and put her hand to her mouth. My father frowned, ready to get up if he needed to, but I only looked at my daughter. She held the fork tightly, as if she had been startled, and that made my chest hurt more than any humiliation. I closed my hand under the table. I was silent, but inside me something screamed. How could she do this in the middle of the family, with our daughter watching? I took a deep breath. I realized that I didn't have to win by shouting. She wanted war. I wanted peace, at least until the right time for the truth to come out. The situations that preceded that had already been accumulating for months. She had been saying that she was the one who took care of everything inside the house, that I had never done anything without her, that if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have achieved anything. I kept quiet every time. I avoided exposure. She seemed to want an audience for every drama. The truth is that the house was bought with the money I had saved for years, working 2 jobs when we were engaged. I did the financing in my name. But she began to think she owned everything, as if by being a wife she had taken possession of everything that belongs to me. She always liked to show off. She loved to post photos in the backyard on the new sofa I bought, as if it were her merit. She had greed. I had the documents, but I decided to wait. It was no use rubbing evidence in the face of someone who is not ready to face their own mistakes. While she spoke at dinner, saying that I was a failure, that she supported me emotionally, and that without her I wouldn't even have anywhere to drop dead, I only thought about my daughter. I wanted to get her out of this situation, put her away from that circus. But I knew that if I got up and left like that, my wife would use it against Meliter. So I stood still, waiting for her to finish the show. Her family has always been like that too. Noise, screams, humiliation. They think that the louder they speak, the greater their reason. I've changed a lot in the last few years. Before, I tried to argue. Today I understand that noise only increases chaos. I was already planning my move. I had already gone to the registry office that week. I already had the assurance of the truth in the inside pocket of my jacket. I was just waiting for the right moment. They wanted to hurry. I had time. My mother tried to disguise her shame. She looked at me with pity, as if I was being crushed by a situation with no way out. Little did she know that I was holding the exit the whole time. I looked at my daughter again. She looked back at me and her little eyes seemed to ask if I was okay. I smiled slightly to reassure her. At that moment, I stopped being a victim. I became an observer. I began to see my wife not as the love of my life, but as someone who hadn't walked by my side in a long time. She was blindly concerned with looking like the heroine of her own story. But the truth always finds a place to appear. I was just setting the right stage. When the waiter picked up some empty plates, my wife kept talking as if to make sure no one in that room had any doubts about who, in her mind, was in charge of our house. She began to tell a twisted story about how she fought to conquer the home where we lived, as if all the effort had been hers. Between one sentence and another, she looked at my mother as if to say, "See, I am your son's savior." My mother swallowed hard. My father squeezed the edge of the table. As for me, I just watched. With each word of her, my silence grew stronger. My daughter looked at me again, with the same expression as when she is afraid of the dark. I reached for her hand and held it, giving her some of the security she needed at that moment. She relaxed her fingers slowly but remained leaning against me, as if she wanted to hide from it all. I wanted to take her home, or rather, take her away from any environment where love was replaced by competition and screaming. But it wasn't time to leave yet. I was waiting for the exact chance to dismantle, in silence, the theater my wife was staging. She was so busy diminishing me that she didn't even realize how much she was exposing herself. Her voice began to get louder, her hands exaggerating the gestures. The people at the next tables began to notice. She wanted an audience, and now she had it. She said that I had no opinion about anything there. He said I wasn't man enough to support a family, that the house was hers because she was in charge, she was Theon who decided, and I just obeyed. My father even pushed his chair back, ready to interrupt it. I made a quick gesture with my hand for him to remain seated. It was not worth fighting. The truth deserved a bigger stage than a discussion on the verge of hysteria. I was remembering everything I experienced with her. When we got married, I had simple dreams. A quiet life, a comfortable home, a united family. She said she wanted the same. But I soon learned that what she really wanted was to show off. She always compared our lives with other people's. He wanted all the best. New sofa every year, better car, expensive clothes. Not because she needed to, but because she needed to prove something to someone she didn't even know. And if something didn't go the way she wanted, the blame fell on me. If I worked too much, it was because I didn't pay attention. If I worked too little, it was because I didn't support her as she deserved. I became the target of an infinite charge, but I never complained. I believed that it was a phase, that she was just insecure, that I needed to be patient. But there are people who don't want help. He wants dominance. Her parents, for example, always treated her like a princess. Everything she wanted, she had. When we got married, they thought I would be another employee of their daughter's ego. They always looked at me as if I wasn't enough for her. And maybe for the exaggerated consumption pattern of that family, I really wasn't. But I was the one who built our house. Me with my overtime, with my weekends working when she was away spending money. I was the villain because I didn't give her everything she wanted. But the truth is that I was giving her everything she needed. At the wedding, the house was registered in my name. I always thought that marriage is a partnership, that I didn't need to prove ownership with documents. But my lawyer insisted that it be so. Protection, he said. I signed it without thinking about it as a weapon one day. But now the papers I had in my pocket were going to serve not as an attack, but as a defense. And it wasn't to take revenge. It was to put everything in its proper place. She kept saying that that house was hers, that I didn't accept her success, that I wanted to humiliate her. Funny, because that night she was the one who was embarrassing my family. I looked around. My mother trying to hide her tears, my father breathing heavily, my daughter with her gaze lost in the tablecloth. That gave me more strength. I knew that when the truth came, it would not only dismantle the charade but also show my daughter that her father was always on the right side, the side of respect. As my wife spoke, I noticed a detail. She smiled. Not a smile of happiness, but the smile of someone who believes he has won. An almost cruel smile, as if she had publicly defeated me and was now savoring every sip of humiliation she believed had served me. She thought my silence was cowardice, but my silence was planned. He was armed, and I was going to shoot only when she was certain, 100% certain, that she was on top. The best righteousness is that which makes the unjust stumble over his own words. When she paused to breathe and take another sip of the wine, I wiped my mouth with the napkin, took a deep breath and stared at her in silence. She stared back, annoyed by the lack of reaction, and asked if I had nothing to say. I just said that the night was my mother's and that I didn't want to ruin her birthday. My wife laughed contemptuously. She thought that was a sign of weakness. He thought he silenced me. But in fact, she was finishing digging the hole from her own fall. I looked at my daughter and whispered softly, "Finish your juice, princess." And she nodded, trying to keep the tears out of her eyes. There at that moment I decided, today I will no longer choose silence. Today I'm going to pick the right time. I felt that the right time was coming. The waiter brought the dessert, and my wife already seemed looser with the wine, laughing out loud at her own teasing, clearly thinking she had won that night. She turned to my mom and said, "Jane, don't worry. I'll let your son visit the house from time to see his daughter." My mother cut the cake as if she were cutting her own heart. My father leaned his elbow on the table and stared firmly at my wife, as if counting every word and then charging everything with interest. He was a retired military man. He knows well this look of someone who eyes exceeding himself. My wife didn't notice the looks, or if she did, she didn't care. The more attention she felt she received, the more the desire to humiliate grew. She put her fork on her plate and tapped lightly as if wanting to ask for silence for an announcement. "By the way, I want to make it clear here, in front of everyone, that I have the right to decide everything in our house. I'm the one who keeps it standing." She folded her arms, expecting applause. Nothing, just silence. And within that silence, she didn't realize that her power was already slipping through her fingers. I took another breath, a little deeper. I looked at my daughter, who was trying to finish the juice without shedding a tear. It was because of her that I chose to stand up. It was because of her that I didn't explode. Our children learn more from what we do than from what we say. And I wanted her to learn that respect is not shown with noise. Respect is proven with truth. I lightly touched the inside pocket of my jacket, feeling the papers against my fingers. There were months of preparation. There was the real proof. There was what separated arrogance from reality. When she finished bragging, I calmly put my hand on the table. I lowered my body a little, looking into her eyes. Finally, I said, "You can repeat it to me. Whose house is it?" She gave a crooked smile, as if I had just made room for the final number of her show. She straightened her hair, leaned forward and let go. "The house is mine." I said it and I repeat it. "You have nothing there." Some people at the next tables actually heard this. Did she want an audience? Now she had witnesses. Excellent. I nodded slowly and turned to my daughter. "Baby, can you wipe your lips?" She put the napkin in her mouth. Ready. The child was protected from choking on the novelty. So with all the calmness that exists in the world, I took the envelope out of my pocket. It was bent precisely, as if it were a court document. I put it on the table in front of her, without haste. She frowned, trying to understand. My father has already settled in the chair, as if he knows that a turnaround is beginning. My mother held her breath. My daughter just stared with those big eyes, trying to predict what was coming next. My wife laughed mockingly. "What do you want to show? A love letter?" I took the envelope between my fingers and opened it. I took out the papers registered in the notary's office. Silence took over the table. I opened the first page. The deed to the house. Owner's name. Mine. Just mine. "Here's the name of the person who bought the house," I said, keeping my voice low. She widened her eyes for a second, but soon tried to regain control. "That doesn't mean anything. I am also entitled." "Of course you do," I replied. "Right to enter as a guest, because the house has been registered in my name since before the wedding." Her face lost color. All that security she carried turned into a cracked mask. She tried to argue, but the words got stuck in pride. I turned more pages and said, "When you started saying that I didn't contribute, I felt that something was wrong. So I reviewed everything. Receipts, vouchers, payments, and I found out that everything we have was paid for by me." She put her hand on her chest as if she was feeling short of breath. For the first time, she had nothing to say. For the first time, she faced the truth without an audience in favor. The public was now against the theatrical role she played. The people around began to understand what was happening and looked away, embarrassed by her. I took a breath and finished with a calmness I didn't even know I had. "I could have said all this before. I could have argued with you all the times you called me useless, all the times you tried to diminish me, but I realized that you don't listen when you're screaming." She lowered her gaze. My daughter held my hand very tightly. My father relaxed his shoulders. My mother wiped a tear with her napkin. The table was completely silent. I kept watching my wife, waiting for the reaction. It was strange to see her speechless. It seemed as if she was watching the castle itself, which she had built on top of costumes, turn to dust right before her. And at that moment I understood. When someone needs to scream to feel like they own something, it's because you've already lost. My wife stood still, staring at the papers as if they were burning. Her mouth opened a little, but no sound came out. She seemed to be trying to find some explanation, some justification, but all she had was screaming, and at that moment, screaming would only make things worse. She looked around, perhaps hoping for support, but there was no one else willing to hold that charade with her. It was against the truth. And the truth was there, printed, signed, stamped. She tried to laugh, but the sound came out shaky. He said that this did not change anything, that the love between us mattered more than roles. I just stared at her insolence, but now it was no longer that silence she mistook for weakness. It was a silence that said, "It's over." She brought her hand to her forehead, breathing fast. His face was red, his nose wrinkled, his pride beginning to bleed. My father cleared his throat and said firmly, "Respect is not taken by shouting." My mother held my hand under the table, as if to convey strength. But in fact, who was calm there? It was me. I had been preparing for that moment for weeks, and the peace I felt was almost frightening. It was like I was finally putting everything in place. My wife got up from her chair, hitting her knee unintentionally, dropping her napkin on the floor. She was nervous, lost, and for the first time, I felt sorry. Not that arrogant woman who tried to destroy me in front of my family, but of the woman who, without realizing it, built everything on illusions and now saw the real world arrive with force. She pointed to me and asked in a choked voice, "So what do you want? Throw it all away? Destroy our family?" I took a deep breath and answered quietly, just for her to hear, "I want to preserve it. But you can't preserve anything when you turn the house into a war field." She sat down again slowly, as if her legs had lost their strength. And then, for the first time in a long time, she did not attack. He just stood there looking at me with a mixture of fear and doubt. My daughter, not fully understanding, just moved closer to me and rested her head on my arm. I hugged her lightly. I continued speaking, firm but without raising my voice. "I never meant to humiliate you, but today you made a point of humiliating me, and she chose to do it in front of our daughter. So I just gave back the truth, exactly as it is." She lowered her eyes and finally became quiet. The woman who had entered that restaurant thinking she was invincible was now staring at her own reflection without filters. Because the truth has this power, it knocks down those who built their ego on the lie. My father asked for the bill and no one complained. Dinner was over. Each one stood up without saying much. I took my daughter in my arms because she was tired and Hiryis were heavy. My wife stood still, not knowing whether to challenge me again or finally accept that she lost the game she invented. As we were leaving, she held my arm for the first time without force. No shouting. "No oppose. We'll talk at home," she mumbled. I looked at her calmly and replied, "Yes, we will. But this time, with respect." She just nodded, and it was clear that that night she realized something essential. I didn't need to raise my voice to be the owner of my own life. When we got home, silence walked with us to the door. My wife entered first, dropped her bag on the couch and stared at the living room as if she was seeing that place for the first time. I closed the door behind us and accompanied my daughter to her room, adjusted the blanket over her little legs and kissed her forehead. She looked at me with those eyes that see more than they should at her age and asked softly, "Daddy, are we going to be okay?" I smiled and replied with the most genuine certainty I have ever felt, "We're already fine." When I returned to the living room, my wife was sitting on the edge of the armchair, her hands trembling, her gaze lost in a spot that only she could see. She didn't say anything, but you could feel that something inside her had broken, and maybe it would be necessary to break it so that, who knows, she understands that family is not a ring, that marriage is not a dispute, that love is not measured in the volume of the voice. I sat in front of her with the paper still in my pocket, now weightless. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. She took a deep breath and said, "I made a mistake. I let myself go." It was the first time in a long time that she had used the word, "I made a mistake," and I understood that this was not an admission of defeat. It was fear. Fear of losing everything that, deep down, she also loved. Fear of taking away from herself the only thing that really mattered, our daughter. I didn't interrupt her. She continued, "I didn't want it to get to that point. I felt insecure. I thought that if you put me on top, you would see me. I was always afraid of not being enough." I stared at her in silence, and now my silence was not a weapon. It was space. Space for her to say what she never wanted to say. She wiped a quick tear and looked away. I need help," he whispered. She had never said that before. She was always the woman who said she was strong, invincible, impossible to overthrow. And there she was, recognizing one's own fragility. I approached and said in the most honest way I could, "I don't want to beat you. I want us to walk on the same side." She cried, not anger, of relief, as if that pride that weighed so heavily had finally been released. I didn't say that everything was solved, because it wasn't. But for the first time, there was truth among us. And when there is truth, there is chance. I made it clear that respect would be the rule of that house, and that we would never again accept yelling in front of our daughter, that we would talk about everything, but without humiliation. I didn't speak with resentment, I didn't speak with anger. I spoke like a man who understands that winning by shouting has never been a victory. Victory is looking into the eyes of those you love and being able to continue. She agreed. She lowered her head and thanked me for not abandoning her at their restaurant. And I replied simply, I could have done a lot of things differently, but sometimes the best answer is written in a notary's office. She took a deep breath and looked at me, without a mask, without performance. I reached out. She held on, not as someone who dominates, but as someone who asks for support. A small gesture, but that carried everything we had lost, and maybe we could still recover. The house was silent, but it was not a hostile silence. It was a silence that gave room to start over. I turned off the lights in the room and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Calm. It was not victory over her. It was victory over chaos that almost destroyed what we had most precious. My daughter slept peacefully in the room. My wife was by my side. And I knew that night would mark the beginning of a new phase. A phase where no one else would own anything alone. Where each step would be built in the plural. Us. Now I ask you, as if you were sitting at the table with me at that dinner, if it were you, would you let the noise win, or would you show in silence who is really in charge of your life?